The council chamber floated in the dark space around a dying star. Inside the massive structure, 17 species sat in their designated seats, each one representing civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Among them sat Tae-Jun, the human ambassador, in a chair that seemed smaller than the others. He had held this position for 12 years now, and every day felt the same. The elder races spoke, and humanity listened. They decided, and humanity obeyed. Tae-Jun watched as the Vreth counselor stood up, his scaled body reflecting the dim light. The Vreth had been in space for over 5,000 years. They knew everything, or so they claimed. Today, the discussion was about mining rights in the outer sectors. Human colonies needed those minerals desperately, but the Vreth wanted them too. The vote took less than 5 minutes. The Vreth won. They always won. Tae-Jun raised his hand to speak, to argue that human settlements would suffer without those resources. The council leader, a floating creature made of pure energy, simply moved to the next topic. Tae-Jun's hand slowly lowered. No one had even looked at him that far from the council chambers. Captain Hai-1 stood on the bridge of her ship, the Determination. She commanded a fleet of 30 vessels, working alongside alien ships to keep peace in the border regions. Her crew was good, the best humanity had to offer. Lieutenant Dong-Hyen sat at the tactical station, his eyes scanning the screens for any signs of trouble. A message came through from the Vreth commander. They had detected pirates in Sector 7. The plan was simple. The Vreth ships would stay back and provide support. The human ships would go in first. Hai-1 had seen this plan 100 times before. Human ships always went first. Human soldiers always took the biggest risks. And when the battle was over, the Vreth always took the credit. Dong-Hyen turned to look at his captain. He didn't say anything, but Hai-1 could see the question in his eyes. Why do we keep doing this? She had no answer for him. Orders were orders. She gave the command, and the human fleet moved forward into danger, while their allies stayed safe behind them. On the research station Kepler-7, Dr. Mi-Young worked in her laboratory. Around her, scientists from 6 different species studied new medical technology. Mi-Young had spent 3 years developing a treatment that could heal nerve damage in almost any species. It was her proudest achievement. The alien scientists praised her work, called her brilliant, and then copied all her research into their own databases. Last month, the Luminar had published a paper about advanced healing techniques. Mi-Young had read it carefully. Every major idea in that paper came from her research. Her name wasn't mentioned even once. When she complained to the station director, he had smiled and patted her shoulder. He told her that knowledge belonged to everyone in the galactic community. She should be proud that her work was helping others. Mi-Young had stopped complaining after that. But she started keeping 2 sets of notes. One set that she shared with everyone, and another set that she kept locked away. The real breakthroughs stayed hidden now. Back on Earth, Counselor Young-Sik reviewed the latest trade agreements. He had been working in galactic politics for 30 years, longer than any other human. He understood how the system worked better than most. That understanding made him tired. Every agreement looked fair on paper, but the reality was always different. Humans provided raw materials at fixed prices. Alien corporations sold finished products at whatever price they wanted. Humans built the ships. Aliens owned the trade routes. Humans did the dangerous work. Aliens collected the profits. Young-Sik had tried to change things. He had written proposals, made speeches, and negotiated until his voice was hoarse. Nothing ever changed. The elder races listened politely, nodded their heads, and then did exactly what they wanted. They had been doing this for thousands of years. They had refined exploitation into an art form. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Tae-Jun stood before the council once again, this time with excitement in his voice. Human engineers had developed something revolutionary. A new communication system that could send messages across the galaxy instantly. No more delays. No more waiting weeks for signals to travel between stars. Tae-Jun had brought the prototype himself, had demonstrated it to several council members privately. They had all been amazed. He activated the device in front of the full council. A message sent from Earth arrived in the chamber less than a second later. Perfect clarity. Zero delay. The human engineers had done the impossible. Tae-Jun waited for the applause, for the recognition that humanity deserved. The Vreth counselor laughed first. Then the others joined in. The sound echoed through the chamber, and Tae-Jun felt his face grow hot. The council leader floated forward, its energy form pulsing with what might have been amusement. It explained patiently, as if talking to a child, that such technology violated basic principles of physics. Faster-than-light communication was theoretically impossible. The human device must be a trick, or perhaps a malfunction. The council had real work to do. They couldn't waste time on human fantasies. Tae-Jun gathered his prototype and left the chamber. His hands shook as he packed the device away. 12 years of service. 12 years of trying to prove that humanity belonged here. And they had laughed at him. 6 weeks later, the Vreth made an announcement. They had developed a revolutionary new communication system. It could send messages across the galaxy instantly. They demonstrated it before the council, and this time, everyone applauded. The Vreth were visionaries, they said. The Vreth would change everything. Tae-Jun watched the demonstration from his small chair. The Vreth device looked identical to the human prototype. It worked on the same principles. It even had the same minor design flaw that the human engineers had included in the first version. The Vreth had stolen the technology, copied it completely, and now claimed it as their own invention. The council leader congratulated the Vreth on their achievement. It announced that this discovery would benefit all species in the galactic community. The Vreth would receive exclusive rights to manufacture and sell the devices. Humanity would be allowed to purchase them at standard rates. That night, Tae-Jun sent a long message to Earth. He attached all the documentation. He included recordings of both demonstrations. He laid out everything that had happened over the past 12 years. Every stolen idea. Every broken promise. Every time humanity had been used and discarded. He ended the message with a single question. How much longer are we going to let this continue? The message from Fleet Command arrived during the night shift. Captain High One read it 3 times, hoping she had misunderstood something. She hadn't. The orders were clear. Her fleet was to proceed to the Vortex Nebula and eliminate the rebellion there. Use of lethal force was authorized. No prisoners were to be taken. High One called her senior officers to the conference room. Lieutenant Dong Hyen arrived first, followed by the others. She displayed the orders on the main screen and watched their faces as they read. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Dong Hyen broke the silence. He had been running intelligence analysis on the Vortex situation for weeks. The so-called rebellion wasn't a military threat. It was a peaceful independence movement. The Vortex people had simply announced they no longer wished to be part of the Galactic Council. They hadn't attacked anyone. They hadn't seized any territory. They just wanted to govern themselves. The intelligence officer, Jae-sung, pulled up additional data on his tablet. The Vortex system contained massive deposits of rare minerals. These minerals were essential for advanced manufacturing. The Council controlled the mining rights, and the Vortex wanted to control their own resources. That was the real problem. The Council was losing money, so they had declared it a rebellion. High One stared at the orders for a long time. She had followed orders her entire career. She had sent human soldiers into danger, while alien commanders stayed safe. She had watched humanity's contributions be stolen and credited to others. She had swallowed her pride and her anger because that was what duty demanded. But this was different. These orders weren't asking her to be brave or to sacrifice. They were asking her to murder innocent people for profit. She made her decision. She sent a message to Fleet Command. The message was simple and direct. She refused to carry out the orders. She provided all of Jae-sung's intelligence, showing that the Vortesh posed no threat. She requested new orders that didn't involve killing peaceful civilians. The response came within hours. Captain High-One was relieved of command immediately. She was to return to the nearest council station and face a military tribunal. A Vreth officer would take over her fleet. High-One called her crew together. She explained what had happened and what would happen next. She told them they could stay with the fleet or come with her. The choice was theirs, and she would understand either way. Within 10 minutes, every human officer on every ship in the fleet had submitted their resignation. They would all go together. The incident spread through galactic networks like fire. Humans were talking about it everywhere. On research stations and trade posts, in mining colonies and diplomatic centers, people were asking questions. Why had the Council ordered an attack on peaceful people? Why had they relieved a decorated captain for refusing an illegal order? And why were the elder races claiming this was all about human emotional instability? On a small science station near the galactic rim, Su Bin was asking different questions. She worked as a data analyst, a boring job that gave her access to the entire galactic database. For months now, she had been running searches late at night when no one else was watching. She was looking for patterns in how the Council treated younger species. What she found made her sick. Over the past 3,000 years, 47 species had joined the Galactic Council. Only 17 remained. The others had disappeared from the records. Their homeworld still existed, but they were listed as administered territories now. Their populations were classified as citizens of the elder races. Their technological achievements were credited to their administrators. Su Bin dug deeper. She found species that had developed advanced medicine, only to have their research taken and their scientists absorbed into elder race institutions. She found species that had built powerful ships, only to have their designs stolen and their shipyards placed under council management. She found species that had created beautiful art and music, now preserved in museums as examples of elder race culture. The pattern was clear. The council would identify a younger species with useful skills or resources. They would offer membership and partnership. They would praise the younger species and make them feel valued. And then, slowly, they would take everything: technology, knowledge, independence, identity. Some species fought back and were crushed. Others simply faded away, their people eventually forgetting they had ever been independent. Su Bin encrypted all her findings and sent them to every human government official she could identify. She included a special note for Counselor Young Sik. She thought he would want to know the truth about the organization he had served for 30 years. Young Sik received the data package at 3 a.m. He spent the rest of the night reading through it. By dawn, he had made his decision. He requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. As a senior counselor, he had the right to call such a session once per year. He had never used that right before. He would use it now. The council assembled within 2 days. Young Sik stood before them with Su Bin's data displayed on massive screens. He walked them through the evidence carefully. 47 species joined. 30 species gone. Technologies stolen. Cultures erased. Independence destroyed. He showed them the pattern, laid out over 3,000 years of galactic history. The elder races listened in silence. When Young Sik finished, he waited for their response. He expected denial, or perhaps anger. What he got was worse. The council leader floated forward and thanked young Sikh for his presentation. Then it explained that this was simply how galactic civilization worked. Stronger species guided weaker ones. Advanced cultures absorbed primitive ones. This was natural. This was inevitable. This was the way things had always been. The Vreth counselor stood and added his own thoughts. Humanity should be grateful, he said. The council had accepted them despite their youth and inexperience. They had been given opportunities to serve and contribute. Yes, sometimes the elder races needed to guide human development. Yes, sometimes they needed to take control of human innovations to ensure they were used properly. But this was for humanity's own good. Young and emotional species couldn't be trusted with their own advancement. Other counselors nodded in agreement. The Luminar representative spoke about responsibility and burden. The elder races had a duty to manage the younger species. It was exhausting work, but someone had to do it. Humanity should stop complaining and start appreciating the structure that protected them. Young Sikh felt something break inside him. He had spent 30 years believing in this system. He had defended the council to his own people. He had argued that cooperation was better than isolation. He had truly believed that humanity was part of something greater. Now he understood the truth. Humanity wasn't part of anything. Humanity was being consumed. He deactivated the screens and gathered his materials. The council leader asked if he had anything else to say. Young Sikh looked at each of them in turn. These beings who claimed to be so advanced. These civilizations that had conquered the stars. These creatures who saw themselves as humanity's betters. He had only one thing left to say. He thanked them for their honesty. He told them they had finally shown their true faces. And then he submitted his formal resignation from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. That night, young Sikh sent his recommendation to Earth. The message was brief and clear. Humanity should withdraw from the Galactic Council completely. There could be no partnership with those who saw humans as resources to be exploited. There could be no cooperation with those who stole and lied. There could be no future in a system built on the destruction of younger species. The vote on Earth took less than a week. Every nation agreed. Every colony supported the decision. Humanity would leave the Galactic Council. They would leave peacefully, and they would leave completely. And they would never come back. The Galactic Council expected humanity to reconsider within days. Perhaps a week at most. Young species always made dramatic gestures when they felt insulted. They would rage and threaten and demand apologies. Then reality would set in. They would realize they needed the Council more than the Council needed them. They would come back quietly, perhaps a bit embarrassed, and things would return to normal. But humanity didn't reconsider. Instead, something began that the galaxy had never seen before. Every human in Council space started preparing to leave. Commander Buora received her orders 3 days after the vote. She managed 7 research stations scattered across 3 sectors. Each station housed hundreds of scientists and support staff. Each station contained decades of research data and experimental equipment worth billions. Her job was to evacuate everything and everyone within 6 months. It seemed impossible. Buora divided her staff into teams. Some handled personnel evacuation. Others dealt with equipment. A special team led by Dr. Mi Young handled the most delicate task of all, sorting through the research data. They had to separate purely human work from collaborative projects. Anything humans had developed alone would be taken. Anything developed with alien partners would be left behind with complete documentation. Mi Young worked 18-hour days going through files. Some decisions were easy. Her nerve regeneration research was entirely human. It came home. The joint study on stellar formation she'd done with a Luminar colleague stayed behind. But many projects fell into gray areas. What about research she'd started alone, but an alien had contributed one small idea too? What about data she'd collected that aliens had helped analyze? She made a rule for her team. When in doubt, leave it behind. Humanity was leaving with dignity. They wouldn't steal or sabotage. They wouldn't take anything that wasn't clearly theirs. The elder races had built their civilization on theft. Humanity would prove they were better than that. On commercial stations throughout the galaxy, human workers completed their contracts and departed. Kyung-hee managed logistics for a major shipping hub near the galactic core. She coordinated the flow of goods between hundreds of worlds. She knew every ship captain, every route, every regulation. The station's alien owners had always taken her work for granted. Now they were about to learn what she actually did. Kung-hai spent her final month training her replacement, a young Vreth who thought the job looked simple. She showed him the scheduling systems, the inventory databases, the emergency protocols. She explained how to handle delays, how to resolve disputes, how to keep everything moving smoothly. The Vreth nodded and took notes, confident he understood everything. On her last day, Kyung-hee handed over her access codes and wished him luck. As she walked to the docking bay, she heard alarms going off behind her. 3 ships were trying to dock at the same time. The Vreth was already panicking. Kyung-hee kept walking. That wasn't her problem anymore. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human engineers finished their shifts and left. Human mechanics completed repairs and departed. Human administrators closed their files and went home. They left no mess behind them. They didn't break anything or hide problems. They simply stopped fixing everything they had been fixing, and immediately the cracks began to show. Ambassador Taejin prepared for his final address to the council. He had written and rewritten his speech a dozen times. He wanted to say so much. He wanted to list every injustice, every theft, every insult. He wanted to make them understand what they had lost. But in the end, he kept it simple. He stood before the council one last time and thanked them. He thanked them for teaching humanity what not to become. He thanked them for showing humans the difference between partnership and exploitation. He thanked them for making humanity's choice clear. Then he stated simply that humanity was leaving to find its own path among the stars. He wished them well and hoped they would find wisdom someday. The council leader responded with obvious irritation. It called this withdrawal childish and short-sighted. It predicted humanity would regret this decision within a year. When humans came begging to return, the terms would be much less favorable than before. Taejun smiled sadly. He told the council leader that humanity had no intention of returning on any terms. Then he left the chamber for the last time. His ship departed for Earth that same day. What surprised the elder races most wasn't that humans were leaving. It was how thoroughly they were leaving. Within 6 months, not a single human remained in council space. No traders. No researchers. No diplomats. No military personnel. Nothing. Human space stations went dark. Human sections of shared facilities emptied completely. Human shops closed their doors. It was as if humanity had never been there at all. And they had taken their knowledge with them. Every human database was wiped before evacuation. Not destroyed, simply emptied and returned to factory settings. Every piece of human technology was removed or rendered useless. The research Dr. Mi-young left behind was documented but incomplete. The key insights, the breakthroughs that made it work, those were gone. Engineer Namgil led the final phase of withdrawal. His job was to secure human space itself. The border between human and council territory had always been vague and undefended. Now it needed to be clear and absolute. Namgil's team built a network of sensors and early warning systems along every possible entry point. They installed defensive platforms at strategic locations. Nothing aggressive, nothing that violated any treaties. Just a clear message. This is our space. Stay out. The work took months, but when it was done, human territory was completely sealed. Every ship approaching the border received the same automated message. It thanked them for their interest, but explained that human space was currently closed to outside visitors. No timeline was given for when it might reopen. The council reacted with annoyance and amusement. Several counselors made speeches about human arrogance. They joked about the human tantrum and predicted it would end soon. Humanity was young and foolish. They would come to their senses eventually, but not everyone was laughing. On the research station where Mi-young had worked, the alien scientists tried to continue her nerve regeneration project. They had all her documentation. They had her equipment. They had her published papers. But nothing worked. The treatments failed every time. Somewhere in the process, there was a step or a technique that Mi-young hadn't written down. Maybe she thought it was too obvious to mention. Maybe she'd forgotten to document it. Or maybe she'd left it out on purpose. Either way, it was gone now. Similar problems appeared everywhere humans had worked. Systems that had run smoothly started breaking down. Projects that seemed simple became impossible to complete. The elder races suddenly realized how much they had depended on human expertise. But it was too late now. The humans were gone. In the Vortex Nebula, the independence movement that Captain High One had refused to crush received an unexpected message. It came from human space and offered friendship and support. The Vortex could join a new alliance being formed, one based on genuine equality and mutual respect. They would keep their independence, their resources, and their dignity. All they had to do was say yes. The Vortex said yes. They became humanity's first ally, the first members of something new. Other species watched carefully. The Council had abandoned the Vortex, declared them rebels and criminals. But humanity had welcomed them. The contrast was obvious. On Earth, former Counselor Young Sik watched reports from across the galaxy. The Council was struggling. Their economy was weakening. Their authority was questioned. Their youngest members were restless. Good, let them struggle. Let them face the consequences of their arrogance. Humanity had walked away, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Council truly understood what they had lost. 5 years had passed since humanity closed its borders. The Galactic Council was learning a hard lesson about the difference between having knowledge and understanding it. The lesson was expensive and painful, and it was getting worse every day. The communication network failed first. The revolutionary system, the Vreth, had stolen from humanity worked perfectly for 2 years. Then small glitches began appearing. Messages arrived corrupted. Some transmissions never arrived at all. The Vreth engineers tried to fix the problems, but they didn't understand the underlying principles. They could copy human designs, but they couldn't innovate or repair when something went wrong. Within another year, the network had degraded to the point where the Council had to return to the old light-speed communication system. Messages that once arrived instantly now took weeks or months to travel between distant sectors. The galactic government, which had managed thousands of worlds in real time, suddenly found itself waiting ages for responses to urgent questions. The economic problems came next. Supply chains that humans had quietly managed with efficiency collapsed into chaos. Kyung-hee had organized logistics at just one station. There had been thousands of humans doing similar work throughout the galaxy. Now those jobs were being done by aliens who didn't understand the systems or lacked the attention to detail humans had provided. Ships arrived at empty docking bays because someone forgot to schedule them. Cargo sat in warehouses because nobody coordinated the distribution. Essential supplies ran short while luxury goods piled up unsold. The elder races had assumed logistics was simple work beneath their advanced civilizations. They were learning otherwise. Medical facilities faced their own crisis. Dr. Mi-young's nerve regeneration treatment was just one of hundreds of human medical innovations that couldn't be replicated. Alien doctors had the procedures written down. They followed every step exactly as documented. But patients still died on their tables. Somewhere in the process, human doctors had applied intuition, experience, or techniques they'd never thought to write down. That knowledge was gone now. The military situation was even worse. Captain Hai 1 had commanded one peacekeeping fleet. Hundreds of human officers had served throughout the Council's military forces. They were always given the most dangerous assignments, always placed in the most desperate situations. And somehow, they always found solutions. Human tactical innovation had saved countless lives and won countless battles. Now those humans were gone. The peacekeeping fleet that Hai 1 once commanded suffered devastating losses in conflicts that human strategy would have resolved without firing a shot. The Vreth admiral in charge kept using traditional elder race tactics, overwhelming force and superior numbers. These tactics worked against weaker opponents, but were disastrous against competent enemies. In one particularly embarrassing incident, a small pirate group held off the entire council fleet for 3 weeks. Lieutenant Dong Hyen, watching from human space, analyzed the battle and sent an anonymous message explaining how to defeat the pirates using their own tactics against them. The council commander ignored the advice, dismissed it as human trickery, and lost 12 more ships before finally withdrawing. On a research station, now run entirely by the Luminar species, a scientist named An Rai continued her work. She had been friends with several human researchers before the withdrawal. She missed them personally, but more than that, she missed their approach to science. Humans asked different questions. They tried unusual experiments. They found connections between seemingly unrelated fields. The Luminar were brilliant, but they were also rigid in their thinking. Without human input, research had slowed dramatically. Henri had started doing something dangerous. She maintained secret contact with Earth, sending regular reports about conditions in Council space. She told them about the failing infrastructure, the struggling economy, the growing discontent. She sent this information because she believed the humans deserved to know the impact of their departure. And perhaps, secretly, because she hoped they might return someday. But from what she could tell, humanity had no interest in returning. In fact, humanity seemed to be thriving. Trade ships from human space occasionally appeared at independent stations along the border. These stations weren't part of the Council anymore. They'd declared independence following the Vortex example, and humanity welcomed them. The traders brought goods of remarkable quality and technology beyond anything the Council currently produced. Young Councillor Chol Min led humanity's new diplomatic efforts. He traveled to these independent stations, meeting with species that had left the Council or were considering it. His message was always the same. Humanity was building something new, an alliance based on equality and mutual respect. Every member kept complete sovereignty. Technology was shared freely with proper credit given. Decisions required consensus, not domination. Dozens of minor species within Council territory sent secret messages to human space. They asked careful questions. What would be required to join this new alliance? Would they be treated as equals or subordinates? Could they keep control of their own resources? Chil Min answered honestly every time. Yes, they would be equals. Yes, they could control their own resources. The only requirement was treating other members with the same respect they wanted for themselves. 3 more species formally left the Council that year. 2 others announced they were considering it. The elder races responded with threats and sanctions, but these tactics no longer worked. Species that had watched humanity leave successfully, now knew departure was possible. The fear that had kept them compliant was gone. The council finally acknowledged their crisis in a closed emergency session. For 12 hours, the elder races argued and blamed each other. The Vreth claimed the Luminar had mismanaged the technology transition. The Luminar accused the Vreth of military incompetence. Other species pointed fingers in every direction. But eventually, they had to face an uncomfortable truth. Humanity had been carrying the council far more than anyone realized. Human innovation had driven technological progress. Human efficiency had kept systems running. Human tactical genius had won battles. Human diplomacy had maintained relationships with younger species. The elder races had taken credit for all of it, while doing less and less of the actual work. Now that humanity was gone, the whole structure was collapsing. Even worse, humanity hadn't been stagnant during their isolation. The technology appearing from human space suggested they'd been advancing rapidly. The communication devices human traders carried were smaller and more reliable than anything the council had. The ships they flew incorporated designs nobody had seen before. Medical treatments developed in human space were curing conditions the council couldn't treat. During their time in the council, humanity had been holding back. They'd shared their older technology, kept their cutting-edge developments secret. Why would they do that? The answer was obvious once you thought about it. They'd learned quickly that anything they shared would be stolen and credited to others. So they'd stopped sharing their best work. Scientist Subin confirmed this in a presentation she gave at an independent research symposium. She explained that everything humanity had contributed to the council during their 3 generations of membership was decades behind what humans had actually developed. The elder races had been so busy stealing human innovations that they never noticed those innovations were outdated. The implications terrified the council. If humanity had been that far ahead 5 years ago, where were they now? They'd been advancing. Without the council's bureaucratic delays, without having their research stolen, without being forced to waste resources on supporting ungrateful elder races. Human civilization was probably a century ahead of the council now, maybe more. The Vreth counselor called for military action. He proposed sending scout ships into human space to assess their capabilities. The motion was supported and approved. 3 Vreth stealth ships entered human territory the following week. All 3 ships were detected immediately. The Human Defense Network identified them, tracked them, and sent them automated warnings. When the ships continued deeper into human space, automated defense platforms disabled their engines with precisely targeted shots. No lives were lost, but the message was clear. Human defenses were far more advanced than expected. The disabled ships were towed back to the border and released with a polite message. The message thanked the council for their interest, but reminded them that human space was closed to outside visitors. The incident would be overlooked this time as a navigation error. Future intrusions would be treated less kindly. The council realized they were out of options. They couldn't intimidate humanity. They couldn't match human technology. They couldn't survive without the innovations and efficiency humanity had once provided. For the first time in 3,000 years, the elder races understood what it meant to need someone more than they were needed. The invitation arrived through official channels on a Tuesday morning. The Galactic Council requested the presence of former Ambassador Tae-Jun for an emergency session. They used words like cooperation and partnership and mutual benefit. But underneath the diplomatic language, the truth was clear. The council was begging. Tae-Jun was 73 now, his hair completely white. He had spent the last 5 years quietly retired on Earth, watching from a distance as the galaxy changed. He had no desire to return to council space. Those years of service had been the most frustrating of his life. Every day had been a battle for recognition, respect, simple human dignity. He'd lost more battles than he'd won, but this wasn't about what he wanted. This was about what humanity needed. So he accepted the invitation. He wouldn't go alone, though. Captain Hai One would join him. So would former counselor Young Sik. Commander Baiara and logistics expert Kyung Hee completed the delegation. If the council wanted to talk, they would face the people they had exploited and dismissed. The journey to the council chambers felt strange. Tae Chun's ship passed through sectors where human stations once operated. Those stations were dark now, or occupied by other species. 5 years ago, humans had been everywhere in this part of the galaxy. Now they were ghosts, remembered mostly for the holes their absence had created. The council chamber looked the same as Tae Chun remembered. The same floating platform where leaders sat. The same dim lighting around the dying star. The same sense of ancient power and authority. But the beings who sat in those seats looked different. They looked tired, worried, almost desperate. The council leader opened the session with a speech about this importance of unity and cooperation. It acknowledged that perhaps mistakes had been made in the past. Perhaps humanity's contributions hadn't been properly appreciated. Perhaps there had been misunderstandings. The time had come to move past these difficulties and rebuild the partnership between humanity and the council. Tae Jun listened politely. Beside him, Young Sik took notes. Hai One's expression remained neutral, but Tae Jun could see the anger in her eyes. These beings had ordered her to murder innocent people. They'd relieved her of command when she refused. Now they wanted to pretend it had all been a misunderstanding. When the council leader finished, it invited Tae Jun to respond. The old ambassador stood slowly. His body ached from the journey. His mind carried the weight of everything that had happened. But his voice was steady when he spoke. He thanked the council for the invitation. Then he asked them a simple question. Why did they want humanity to return? The elder races looked at each other uncomfortably. The Vreth counselor tried to deflect, talking about shared values and common goals. To Jun repeated his question. Why? Young Sik stood and answered for them. He displayed data on the massive screens, information gathered from their friend Henri and other sources. Economic decline, infrastructure failure, military defeats, technological stagnation. The council was failing, and they knew humanity could fix these problems. But Tae Jun had another question. He wanted to know if the council understood why humanity had left. The council leader started to answer, but Tae Jun held up his hand. He didn't want diplomatic nonsense. He wanted the truth. The chamber fell silent. Finally, a Luminar counselor spoke. She was young by her species standards, only 2 centuries old. She had watched humanity's departure with more understanding than her elders. She admitted the truth simply. The council had exploited humanity. They had stolen human innovations. They had treated humans as resources to be used rather than partners to be respected. They had broken humanity's trust so completely that no words could repair it. Tae Jun nodded slowly. At least one of them understood. He looked around the chamber at each of the elder races. These civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. These beings who saw themselves as superior to younger species. For the first time, they were facing consequences for their actions. He explained what those consequences were. Every exploitation. Every stolen technology. Every human life spent protecting elder species who showed no gratitude. Every insult and dismissal and moment of casual cruelty. He showed statistical evidence of how the council had systematically suppressed human advancement while mining human ingenuity for their own benefit. The elder races sat in uncomfortable silence. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry at being called out. But none of them could deny what Tae Jun was saying. The evidence was overwhelming. Then Dr. Mi Young stood up. She had been sitting quietly, but now she had something to say. She talked about her nerve regeneration research, about finding her work published under alien names, about being told that knowledge belonged to everyone when aliens stole from her, but being threatened with legal action when she tried to use alien research in return. She described the moment she'd realized she needed 2 sets of notes, one to share, one to keep hidden. The moment she'd lost trust in the galactic scientific community. The moment she'd understood that her alien colleagues didn't see her as an equal, but as a source of ideas to exploit. Commander Biora spoke next. She talked about evacuating the research stations, about carefully separating human work from collaborative projects, about leaving behind documentation for everything, even though she knew the elder races wouldn't be able to use it without understanding the underlying principles, about the choice to take the high road, even when abandoning everything would have been satisfying. Captain High One was last. She stood and looked directly at the Vreth counselor who had ordered her to attack the Vortesh. She described that day, reading the orders, understanding what they truly meant, making the choice to refuse. She talked about every human officer resigning in solidarity, about walking away from careers they loved because their principles mattered more. And she told them about the Vortesh, how humanity had welcomed them, how the Vortesh were now thriving as equal members of a new alliance, how dozens of other species were asking to join because they'd seen what real partnership looked like. The council listened to all of this in growing discomfort. When the humans finished speaking, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then the council leader asked the question they'd been avoiding. What would it take for humanity to return? Taejun smiled sadly. That was the wrong question. Humanity wasn't interested in returning to the council. The council represented everything humans had learned to reject: exploitation, theft, lies, the casual cruelty of the powerful toward the weak. Humanity had walked away from that, and they would never go back. But Taejun had brought an alternative. Young Seek activated a new presentation. This one showed the framework for the Free Species Alliance. Any civilization could join as an equal partner. Technology was shared with full credit. Decisions required consensus, not dominance. Most importantly, member species maintained complete sovereignty. No one would ever be absorbed or exploited again. 27 species had already joined. The number grew weekly. The Alliance was building something the galaxy had never seen before. A true community of equals. And the Galactic Council was invited to join. Not as leaders or managers. Not as superior beings guiding younger species. But as equal partners with the same rights and responsibilities as everyone else. The council leader looked shocked. The Vreth counselor looked insulted. Several other counselors began arguing among themselves. The idea that they should join an alliance as equals rather than leaders was apparently unthinkable. But the young, Luminar counselor who had spoken earlier stood up. She said she would take the proposal to her people. She believed they would be interested in genuine partnership. Several other counselors from smaller elder races nodded agreement. The Vreth counselor declared this was unacceptable. The elder races had built galactic civilization. They had earned the right to lead. They would not bow to younger species. If humanity wanted to play games with inferior civilizations, that was their choice. But the true powers of the galaxy would maintain their dignity. Taejun gathered his materials. He thanked the council one final time. He told them the choice was theirs to make. They could join the alliance as equals and help build something better. Or they could cling to their pride and continue their decline into irrelevance. Either way, humanity would be fine. The human delegation left the chamber. Their ship departed for human space that same day. Behind them, the council dissolved into argument. Some species saw the offer for what it was, a lifeline. Others saw it as an insult. The elder races had spent 3,000 years in positions of dominance. Accepting equality felt like defeat. Over the following months, several council species made their choice. The Luminar were first, followed by 3 others. They formally left the council and applied for alliance membership. They were accepted with the same terms as everyone else. Equal partners. Nothing more, nothing less. The Vreth and several other elder races refused. They withdrew into their own territories, still claiming superiority even as their infrastructure continued failing. Some managed to stabilize. Others fell into decline. All of them learned that pride was expensive. 5 years later, the Free Species Alliance had grown to 53 members. Former council space had fragmented into smaller regional powers. Some were prosperous, others struggling. The galaxy was more complex now, more chaotic. But it was also more free. Captain High One stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the stars. She commanded an integrated fleet now, with officers from a dozen species. They worked together as genuine equals. Every species contributed according to their strengths. Everyone received according to their needs. This was what she'd imagined military service could be, back before the Council's cynicism had taught her otherwise. Dr. Mi Young ran a research institute that trained scientists from every Alliance member. She taught them her techniques openly, without fear of theft. Her students published papers that credited her properly. Some of them would probably surpass her one day. That thought made her happy rather than threatened. Ambassador Tae Jun, now 83 and truly retired, sat in his garden and read reports from across the galaxy. The Alliance was growing. New species joined monthly. Technologies were being developed collaboratively. Medical breakthroughs, engineering innovations, scientific discoveries, all of it shared freely with proper attribution. Some days, messages arrived from former council species. They described the conditions in their territories, the continuing problems, the growing realization that they'd made a mistake. Some asked if it was too late to reconsider. Tae Jun always replied the same way. It was never too late. The Alliance welcomed anyone ready to treat others as equals. In orbit above Earth, a young pilot named Ji-ho prepared for a long-range exploration mission. Her crew included members from 7 species. They would venture beyond known space, searching for new civilizations to contact. When they found those civilizations, they wouldn't offer exploitation disguised as partnership. They would offer friendship based on mutual respect. This was humanity's legacy. Not conquest or domination. Not revenge against those who had wronged them. Simply the patient work of building something better. Showing the galaxy that civilization could be kind. That power didn't require cruelty. That the strong could lift up the weak instead of crushing them. The Galactic Council had finally understood this truth, though it had taken them far too long. Humanity's greatest gift wasn't their technology or innovation. It was their vision of what civilization could be when built on genuine respect rather than exploitation. Some species learned this lesson quickly. Others never learned at all. But humanity would keep teaching it, one species at a time, one partnership at a time, until the entire galaxy understood.